Hello, this is Mahan Didia. In this portion of the book on liquid formulation, we continue to focus on pre-formulation of emulsion. In this module 13.2, we will introduce concept of HLB. HLB of the surfactant or emulsifier and HLB required by the oil. We'll also look at laboratory methods to determine zeta potential and globule size. Include an example of pre-formulation studies of emulsifier on a nanoemulsion with physical properties, particle size distribution, and zeta potential. HLB concept was developed in 1949 by Griffin. He presented this to Cosmetic Society in Chicago. There are limitations to HLB applications. It should be used as a starting point for selection of oil phase and emulsifier that would stabilize emulsion. HLB has two separate interrelated portions. Emulsifier or surfactant, which has an HLB value assigned, and oil phase that requires a specific HLB to stabilize emulsion. Analogy would be similar to hand and glove. HLB. Surfactant molecules have both hydrophilic and lipophilic components. Lipophilic are soluble in oil, and hydrophilic components are more soluble in aqueous or water. Hydrophilic lipophilic balance, HLB, is the balance of the size and the strength of hydrophilic and lipophilic moieties on a surfactant. Griffin developed an empirical scale with values of 1 to 20. It has been now expanded to increase higher than values of 20. Lower HLB values, less than 8, indicates higher affinity towards oil phase, and these surfactants or emulsifiers are more suited for water in oil emulsion, where water is the dispersed or globule phase. Higher HLB number, higher than 8, indicate higher affinity towards water. These surfactants are better suited for oil in water emulsion. In this case, oil is the dispersed or globule phase. Let's look at several surfactants of similar category. We'll compare SPAN and twin. SPAN 65 has a molecular structure shown here. Has a hydrophilic group. It has 3 alkyl chains. Give its HLB of 2.1. SPAN 65 is oil-loving molecule. SPAN 65 is more suitable for water in oil emulsion. SPAN 20 has water-loving portion here and single chain. Its HLB is 8.6. So SPAN 20 is more water-loving compared to SPAN 65. Polysorbate 65, brand name is Twin 65, has a large polar group and it has 3 alkyl chains. Polysorbate 65 has HLB of 10. Compare that to polysorbate 20, has a large polar group and single alkyl chain. Polysorbate 20 has HLB of 70. Influence of hydrophilic and lipophilic moiety and its relationship to HLB. There are ways to calculate HLB numbers based on chemical properties of the surfactant. Polymeric emulsifiers are used in double emulsion. Double emulsions are emulsion of an emulsion. The emulsifier selection requires difference that are used in inner emulsion to be different from that used in the double or outer emulsion. Poloxamine 908 scaffolding, and depending on the chain length, the HLB will change. HLB in this case is 31. That means extremely water-loving, and that's used in double emulsions. Another commonly used emulsifier is PGPR, polyglycerol polyresinoloate, that has HLB of 4. Emulsifier based on scaffolding, such as PEG 40 hydrogenated castor oil, has HLB range from 4 to 9 depending on its molecular structure. Dimethacones can be converted into an emulsifier by adding polyethylene glycol, polypropylene glycol groups, HLB of about 5. HLB oil phase. Surfactant has an HLB. Oil phase requires an HLB for it to be emulsified and stabilized. That means surfactant emulsifier having comparable HLB value and compatible structure will form stable formulations. Required HLB will depend on what kind of emulsion is being formed. In this case, oil and water emulsion is shown. Vegetable oil family require HLB of a surfactant to be about 6 to form oil and water emulsion. Silicone oil siloxane requires 8 to 12 to form oil and water emulsion. Petroleum oil such as mineral oil requires HLB of 10 to form oil and water emulsion. Ester emollients HLB requirement is about 12. Fatty acids and alcohols, such as acetyl alcohol, require HLB of about 15. Petroleum oil to produce water and oil emulsion, HLB should be around 5. So let's look at coconut oil, fractionated triglyceride. This is the glyceride molecule and alkane chain. It requires HLB of 5. Mineral oil is a mixture and requires HLB of 10 to form oil and water emulsion. Acetyl alcohol is an oil, and in order to form oil and water emulsion, it requires emulsifier having HLB of about 15.5. HLBs, surfactant, oil, and aqueous phase. Aqueous phase does not have required HLB. Aqueous phase contains solubilized ingredients such as salt, pH, preservative, thickening agents. These ingredients can affect surface tension of the aqueous phase. Aqueous phase is shown here with a surfactant and oil phase. And depending on the ions present in the surfactant, they will either attract or repel the emulsifier. So interfacial tension and the film formation property depends also on the aqueous phase. It's shown here in the graph. pH of the aqueous phase is varied from 2 to 12. Globule decreases from about 49 nanometer to about 20 nanometer. pH of the aqueous phase can affect the globule size. Physicochemical property, globule size, particle size of emulsion provides information on its properties. Increase in particle size during storage indicates instability due to oswald ripening or coalescence. Microscopic examination and laser diffraction particle size are most commonly used. Studies in preformulation to identify emulsifiers and the particle size and effects. Let's look at how it's done. A cuvette, which is specialized, is inserted into zeta sizer. A reference controlled cuvette is attached. The door is closed and the program takes over and it shows the particle size of the material. In this case, it's 60 and 200 nanometer. Program then can be changed to measure zeta potential. And it shows a single peak. It shows a single peak at 68. So this type of instrumentation is relatively easy to use and provides both globule size and zeta potential. Zeta potential, reader is requested to refer to Module 3.2 and Module 9.2 for additional information on zeta potential. It will not be discussed in detail here. Zeta potential is a difference of potential between the surface of the bound layer of the dispersed phase and the region in continuous phase. In a preformulation study, 3 different emulsifiers, anionic, cationic, and non-ionic, at different pHs are studied for its particle size and zeta potential. For emulsions to be stable, zeta potential of 50 millivolt is desired. In this case, at pH 3, zeta potential shows unstable emulsion. That means it will separate. In cationic, pH 3 shows positive 51 millivolt. That means it's stable. Whereas at pH 6 and 8, although particle size is small, zeta potential shows instability. Non-ionic emulsion, particle size is 0.3 micron or 300 nanometer, and zeta potential is unacceptable. Zeta potential at pH 6 is low, whereas zeta potential at pH 8, although particle size is higher than pH 6, it's more stable. Preformulation laboratories to select emulsifiers. Let's look at physicochemical characteristics of resveratrol parenteral formulation prepared with lecithin as an emulsifier and lecithin and polysorbate as co-emulsifier. This is compared with placebo. Placebos are listed as P and active drug is RSP. It shows zeta potential in millivolt, particle size in nanometers, polydispersity index, PDI, polydispersity index, smaller the value, better distribution, and viscosity. Resveratrol with lecithin alone shows high zeta potential. Particle size is also high. In parenteral formulation, expectation would be particle size of less than 200 micron so that it can be sterile filtered. Resveratrol with lecithin and polysorbate, zeta potential is around 50 and particle size is below 200 micron. Viscosity is also low. That lecithin with polysorbate can be further developed. Reader is requested to review Module 16.2 for clinical study on these formulations.